There's a reason to be optimistic about your future and about your ability to heal yourself and to improve yourself and to get out of whatever suffering you are currently stuck in. And I say that not because I'm some kind of a naive optimist. I don't say this because that's, wishful thinking. That's what I hope for. I say this because of a very simple and fundamental fact of life that I feel like it seems like nobody's noticing this. I obviously encounter a lot of people who are suffering terrible addictions, are kind of stuck in a dopamine hole, are totally overwhelmed. Often this kind of thing, like these dopamine addictions, can lead you down a spiral where you feel totally overwhelmed and you feel like kind of hopeless, right? You feel like there's no way out. And I know that sucks. I've been there myself. So nothing I'm saying here is to like invalidate or minimize your suffering. I know how bad it can suck, especially if you've gotten like sucked down one of these addiction spirals. I know what it's like to feel totally hopeless. I've gone through long and really desperate periods of depression in my life. And one of the reasons I'm making this content on this channel is because I've been there and I've kind of dug myself out of that hole and I've had to learn how to cope with this kind of stuff. But on the way, I learned things and I realized things that now make me very, very optimistic. And I'll cut right to the chase. The thing that most people in our culture seem to miss, and that is a simple fact of life, is that you always have a natural tendency towards health. It's like this: the state of health and well-being as a human being, you are being pulled towards that state of health and well-being like it's a gravity well. You're actually constantly drifting towards a state of health and well-being. Or you can also think of it as a stream. Like if you're in a stream and you're just going along with the flow, that actually leads you to a state of health and well-being. And let me explain exactly what I mean by that. The first piece of evidence we have for this that everybody's experienced is think about how wound healing works. Something happens, you cut your finger, you scratch your knee, something like that, right? You have a wound. What do you need to do for that wound to heal? Nothing, right? All you need to do is remove interference. If you just wait, your body naturally heals itself. You don't have to make any kind of effort. You don't have to have any kind of special knowledge. You don't have to consult an expert. There's nothing complicated about it. You scratch your knee, you just wait, and it gets better. The only thing that you need to do is you need to remove interference. This is why what we tend to do is maybe disinfect the wound and put a Band-Aid on it, because we're like, okay, the body is going to heal this wound. And obviously, if we shove dirt onto this wound and if we get it infected and stuff, that interferes with the body's natural healing process. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. That's it. You're removing interference. The rest happens by itself. And it turns out this is not an exception. Just like your body repairs itself without any kind of effort, and all you have to do is remove interference, in other aspects of your health and well-being, the exact same thing is happening. And all you have to do is stop interfering, stop swimming upstream. So let's look at some further evidence, some further examples of this happening. This here is the True North Health Center. And what they do with patients who suffer from all kinds of complicated and usually very long-lasting conditions, sometimes terrible health conditions that they've tried to manage with medication and all kinds of interventions for a long time to no effect. What they do is long-term water fasting. So under medical supervision, with the guidance of doctors and all the safety protocols needed, they basically put people on a water fast, meaning those people don't eat any food whatsoever for anything from 5 days to, I think, up to 40 days. So sometimes very long fasting periods. And that's it. People are simply in this clinic. They are not eating any food. They're only drinking water. And they're generally resting. As you can imagine, when you're doing a long fast, you don't feel very high energy. You feel pretty tired. You might also feel like your body processing stuff. And most of the time, you just want to rest. So literally, they're just doing nothing. And the health outcomes of long-term water fasts are spectacularly good. Why is that? All we're doing here is we're removing interference. Look, the reason why so many people are sick and tired and feel terrible physically is because we're constantly interfering. And look, I'm not blaming anyone here. The world we live in makes it kind of hard, right? Because we're constantly surrounded by all kinds of temptations and all the kind of fast food and convenience food and hyper-processed food. And and food that's been engineered to be addictive is unfortunately really bad for us. And that's essentially swimming upstream. Every day you're taking in food that is bad for you. Every day you're damaging your health. Every day you're swimming upstream. And because these foods have been engineered to be addictive, most of us also overeat. We overconsume. So it's like we're taking large doses of poison in every single day. And then after many, many years, we have all kinds of health conditions. We have all kinds of ailments. We're suffering. And it turns out in many cases, the solution is to just do nothing. Just stop eating this poison all the time. Just give your body some time. And guess what happens? It just repairs itself. You just do nothing for long enough and your body returns to a state of health and well-being. Just to be clear, I don't recommend that anyone do long-term water fasting. This is something that should only be done under medical supervision. But we also know that even shorter fasting periods can be really beneficial. Lots of people report that even doing something like a 16-hour fast every day, so it's kind of like just skipping breakfast, right? You just wait a bit longer before you have your first meal, and you maybe have an early dinner. Lots of people report feeling, more energy and generally just better and healthier when they do that. So even a short fasting period, and anyone can do a 1-day fast, maybe a 2-day fast. And people have been doing this since forever, right? In many traditions, there's some kind of fasting as kind of a spiritual practice or something like that. So this is not a new idea. Obviously, we discovered this thousands of years ago, that sometimes it's good to just stop eating for a while and let your body do its thing. And we also understand some of this, right? We know that the body switches into a kind of a rest and repair mode when you stop eating for a while. There's the autophagy, which is kind of a recycling process in your body that's really good for you. And I'm not going to go into all of those details. There's loads of content you can find on this if you want to know why fasting is healthy. You want to learn more about that. But the interesting observation here is that just doing nothing is really good for you because your body is constantly moving towards a state of health and well-being. Okay, so I've talked about health so far. But why do I also say well-being? When it comes to things like, mental health, your well-being, your happiness, stuff like that, does this apply as well? Yes, it does. Think about meditation. Meditation is the act of sitting down and doing nothing. And somehow, the longer you do this, the better you tend to feel. My personal experience with this is that I discovered meditation at a pretty young age, and I practiced and learned all kinds of different forms of meditation over the years. On and off. It's not like I was constantly always meditating, but I was interested in it, and I did it on and off for a long time. But the biggest breakthrough that I had with meditation, where something clicked for me and I suddenly started benefiting so much more from it, was when I essentially stopped trying so hard. So I'd been doing a lot of meditation where I'm like focusing on my breath and bringing my attention back to my breath, or doing visualizations and doing other kinds of practices. And those can be beneficial, not saying those are bad. But for me, what was a huge leap forward was when I just stopped trying. When I learned to meditate and essentially just be there and not do anything with my mind and not pursue any kind of goal and not do any kind of visualization, just be there and do nothing. For me, this kind of do nothing meditation is the form of meditation that brings me the most immediate, most noticeable benefits to my well-being and happiness from all the forms of meditations I've ever tried, which follows this same pattern that we've been observing. Just do nothing, and somehow that leads to happiness and well-being. There's a lot of talk nowadays about the big mental health crisis that's going on. And again, I've seen this, right? A lot of people that I've worked with are pretty deep in mental health suffering. And I think it's completely analogous to what is happening with food and illness, where unfortunately we are in an environment where we're constantly being stimulated by stuff that's engineered to get our engagement and be addictive and all this kind of stuff. And then what happens, of course, we get addicted. And all this stimulation, all this constant input is causing all kinds of problems. But it turns out the solution, or a big part of the solution, is to just stop. Just doing nothing is incredibly good and incredibly helpful. And the more you do or don't do, like the more of the do nothing you do, right? The more of a break you take from all this input, the better the results. So do you see what I mean? Do you see why I'm so optimistic? Isn't it amazing to consider that we're suffering from some really serious problems, but one of the big solutions that anyone can access for free without any kind of complicated system, without medications, without needing experts, is just do nothing for a while and things get better. And the cool thing is you can find this out for yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. I think this is one of the great things about it. Look, there's nothing wrong with more sophisticated and more complicated stuff. So if you take the meditation example, there's nothing, obviously there's meditation traditions that are more sophisticated, more complex, that involve detailed instruction and mentorship and so on. And that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that. But isn't it amazing that you don't even have to believe me and you don't need any kind of instructions. You don't need any kind of expert. You can just find out for yourself. You can just sit down and do nothing, remove all stimulation for a while and just notice what's happening. And maybe you go, oh, okay, well, this is pretty boring. And I'm feeling an urge to reach for my phone or something. But then remember, you don't have to do anything about that. So you don't have to be like, well, I have to manage this urge, right? I have to manage my fidgetiness or no, you don't have to do anything. You just let it play out and you just continue doing nothing and see what happens. And then maybe you notice that in the beginning, you feel really restless, then you feel bored, then your mind starts to wander, and then maybe other stuff happens. I mean, I'm not going to tell you, I can't tell you what's going to happen for you. Your experience is going to be yours. But you do that for a while, and the only thing you kind of remember is just every time you get the impulse to, oh, I should do something about this, you go, oh, wait, no, I'm here to do nothing. You do that for a while, and then you check in and be like, okay, well, how does that feel? Do I feel better than before? How does this compare, like sitting for half an hour doing nothing? How does that compare to sitting for half an hour being overstimulated? And you can decide for yourself. So the way I see it, this is a fact of life. Like I said, it's almost like there's a gravity to health and well-being. And if you just do nothing for long enough, in terms of your physical, mental, and spiritual health, you tend to get better. And this is important. And I think one of the reasons why we don't tend to talk about this or we don't tend to know about this is because it kind of just doesn't match our culture. We have this model that we tend to follow where it's like, well, every problem has to have some kind of an expert. And, you have to get a special education and special certifications in order to become this expert. And then you have to pay that expert, and maybe there's some medication and there's some system. We love to apply external solutions, and we love to turn every problem into something that can be commoditized. Pay the expert, pay for the service, pay for the product to solve this problem. And so this idea, this very important idea, which is, hey, a big part of the solution might be just don't do anything, doesn't fit into our culture really well, because who are going to pay for this, right? Who are you going to hire? How is this going to increase the GDP if people just stop doing things and that solves their problem? So I think that's why this is very underreported in our culture, but that doesn't make it any less true. And it's important because it's very empowering. Look, I'm a big believer in you are more capable than you think you are. And so even in the depths of suffering, even in the depths of addiction, you're much more powerful than you think you are. And you're much closer to a solution in the sense of you're much closer than you think to taking that first step, which leads to the second step, which gives you momentum, which then leads you to a place where you're looking back and you go, wow, I can't believe how far I got. You're much closer to that. You're much more capable of that than you realize. And to me, this principle of things get better when you just don't do anything is proof of that, because you are absolutely capable of doing that and of finding out for yourself.